Hi, this is part two, episode three of Green Couch Conversations. I'm your host, Tiffany Bainman, and today we're going to talk about Black History Month, the significance of HBCUs in the Divine Nine, and how ERGs play an important role in fostering an inclusive workplace. Let's jump back into the discussion. Okay, so there was an interesting discussion that came up between those that went to an HBCU and those that did not. And so this question came to light. So some may say attending an HBCU doesn't prepare students for the real world. What's your response? For those that went to an HBCU, what's your response to that?
I'll take that question first and foremost, and I'd probably use a word that says malarkey. Uh, let me tell you that what North Carolina A&T did for me, I absolutely am convinced I would not have gotten anywhere else. I wouldn't have because it starts with what I mentioned before, and that George reiterated. You know, to walk on a campus and you look around and you see professors, you know, the college president who knew me by name, who would take the time to go out and talk to students. To have a professor that I remember named John Morris, who taught me strength of materials in an engineering class, who told us, you know, if you're going to be an engineer, then he gave us math problems that were either 0 or 100. That was the score. You either got it all right or all wrong, and that was his methodology for teaching. And what he instilled in us, he and many others, was a level of confidence and self-worth and belief in your abilities, that allowed me personally, when I left North Carolina A&T, I always believed that there was nothing I could do, that there was no one better than me. Certainly not a belief that I was better than anyone else, but there was no one better than me, and that there was no one who could outwork me. And I that those lessons, from people that I respected and I admired, but more importantly, whom I knew had my best interests at heart. I wasn't just a number in a classroom. You know, I was a name with a face, an individual that where the professor would say, meet me after class, come to my office, and they would do that regularly with us, not to just talk about our academics, but just to really to talk about you. How are you doing? You know, is everything going okay? Um, uh, those those um, those things, Tiffany, embedded in me as a young man in a developmental part of my life, characteristics and qualities, a level of confidence and certainty, that I am absolutely convinced, no one else or no place else would have cared enough to invest what they did to assure that when I walked out the door, that I represented Aggie pride, and and I do to this day.
I believe that. I believe that. So Naira, you did not go to an HBCU, and you had a different take on why that question might come up or why people might feel that way.
Yes, I did not go to an HBCU, and not to take away from the education that I did receive from Western Michigan University. If I'm being transparent and honest with myself, I answer that question that way when asked, why did I go to an HBCU? But I did not get that same experience that they had. When I listened to John and George and sharing about their experience that they had at their university, it's a defensive vote for me to say that it doesn't prepare you for the real world. But being honest, it sometimes makes me wish that I did go to an HBCU. I just remember my undergrad being filled with being dismissed. You're in a lecture hall with 300 people, and there's maybe five Black people that look like you in the class. And so you're scanning, trying to find someone that looks like you that you can connect with. You raise your hand to ask a question. You never get called on. You go see your counselor. You're waiting. The advice that they give you is generic. They don't don't even know your name. You're an ID number. So yeah, I definitely can say I did not go to an HBCU. The reason why I didn't go to an HBCU, if you had asked me that back then, I would say it wasn't going to prepare me for the real world. But knowing what I know now, I would say an HBCU definitely prepares you for the real world. And those of us who say otherwise, as John said, it's malarkey.
Well, Gina, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of start out maybe the same way as Naira, but I knew, I think, just from the beginning that I probably should go, go to an HBCU, but I didn't just because, some personal reasons. I needed to stay near family. And so I went to the University of Central Arkansas. And although UAPB, University of Arkansas, was down the road, it wasn't quite close enough for the family, the situation that I had, and I needed to, kind of be really, really close to family. But I 100% knew at my school at UCA, I felt like it was focused really on trying to make sure that I felt the same, if that makes sense, like that. I did have some really great advisors and some really great, teachers that were not of color that extended, hey, I just want to make sure, let you know that you can do anything. How's everything going? But it was more from a perspective of making sure that I felt equal or I felt the same as some other, the other students. But in all actuality, I'm not the same. I'm not different. The world doesn't treat me, it was kind of a fall for me to think that, if, my white teacher thinks I'm great and I'm getting, all of these praise and accolades, but then you get out in the real world and you get hit with, like Naira was saying, nobody's checking to see if you have something to say. You raise your hand, they're overlooking, they don't even see you. So I think for me, I wasn't prepared for, because I didn't go to an HBCU. Not that I wasn't prepared. I was prepared for the diversity, but not how to handle the fact that everybody wasn't going to see me and everybody wasn't going to understand my culture and where I came from. They spent so much time trying to make me fit in or be the same as everybody that my differences weren't recognized. And I think that I certainly would have gotten that at an HBCU to say, hey, no, you're different and that's okay, but here's how you use that difference to make a difference, right? To be better, to be on that same level and know, like everyone's been saying, that nobody's better than you. So for me, I wish I had I'd gone to an HBCU for sure, because I did see the difference earlier on.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to talk about Cricket and AT&T from a business perspective and our relationship with HBCUs. So Cricket's based in Atlanta, home to 4 HBCUs. We talked about that. What are your thoughts on, Jermaine, maybe you take this. What should we be doing to attract talent from these HBCUs?
I definitely think, recruitment is key, and increasing recruitment from HBCUs across the country. I know last year we had interns from Howard and other HBCUs, which is critical, but it has to go beyond internships. It has to be a pathway to a career that is built inside the brand. I think HBCU students are some of the smartest and well prepared for corporate America as any other university, Big Ten colleges across the country. So I think investing not only in opportunities that are created, but also creating scholarship for students to migrate from high school to an HBCU university, particularly kids in low-income areas or, challenging areas where that path to college is not always straight or cannot always be seen. For me, growing up in Detroit, I didn't have an HBCU there, and I didn't grow up in a family with any linkage to an HBCU, so that was never at the forefront of attending there. But now having kids and daughters that are set to graduate next year and living in Atlanta, and so now I am pushing them to consider an HBCU because I think it's important. It prepares you, I think, how to survive in the world as a Black person and being proud of being that Black person versus similar to what Naira and Gina said, going to a standard university, how you're just learning to survive and compete to graduate and get a job, or not realizing, facing the obstacles of being a Black person in corporate America that I think you get from the HBCU because you carry that pride not only of the school, but of your culture everywhere you go. So I hope that answered your question. Sorry, I know that went wrong.
Yeah. So I did some digging on our recruitment, and anybody can jump in here. So there's 100 plus. I think, John, you said 103. I had 107. So it's more than 100 schools with over 228,000 students enrolled. So there's a lot of talent there. We actively recruit today as a corporation from Hampton University, North Carolina A&T, Morehouse, Spelman, Atlanta University Center Consortium. And it got me thinking, because I'm like, well, if with our MEAC SWAC agreement, there's a lot more schools than those. And so we're doing like focused recruitment at those schools. And I think we've got an opportunity as a company with these relationships we've created to expand beyond that. Not just in our Southeast markets, but also actually across the country. So I think we've got some real opportunity as we learn more about HBCUs. I think we've got opportunities to leverage that. Do you have any other thoughts or suggestions on that subject for recruiting?
Hey, Tiffany, I would like to chime in on that and just suggest we have a lot of HBCU grads within our ranks. And if we employed the opportunity to designate school champions or some additional assistants, there are a lot of us that are active in our campuses or would love to go back and be active. I think that would be a great way. We're already advocates for AT&T, for our brand, certainly for cricket. And so I think that would be a great way to enhance recruitment opportunity and really just share information, especially because we also have a shared bond with those students that are at these HBCUs now.
That's a great idea.
And Tiffany, I think we discussed before, looking where our retail locations are compared to where universities are. I did some research and saw that, we have several universities that are within 2 miles of a Cricket store. So how do we engage that store with that university, whether it's simple as putting signage in our windows, welcoming students back to university or congratulating students who are graduating? How do we recognize notable individuals that graduated from that local university? How do we engage during homecomings, doing football games, basketball games? So I think there's ways from a retail integration that we can connect with these universities as well to not only raise the profile of our brand, but also connecting what we do in those communities in which HBCUs across the business.
That's great. Okay. So, John Grant, I'm going to direct this one to you. Why do you believe it's important for companies like Cricket to support HBCUs, not just financially, but through internships and other means?
You were just referencing it. Talent. Think about what I just mentioned to you throughout history and the number of inventions that Black people think things that they invented that we enjoy today. Resting in these institutions are some of the greatest minds, the best talent that is untapped. And I will always say the leading word for me is in being intentional. And that doesn't take away from anything or anyone else, but to be intentional, to make sure that no stone is left unturned. What HBCUs are really, really, really good at, they're better than anyone else, is to take that raw talent, that raw individual that can come from, in a lot of instances, whether it's a challenging background or they may not necessarily be, the most affluent, and taking that raw individual and turning them into a champion. And that's what every company wants, champions. They want people who can come into their organization, think creatively, and be able to contribute, from the outset. One thing that I learned again from North Carolina A&T, and I know that this is the case, not just with them, because I'm on HBCU campuses with what I do all the time. I see this, what as we term, on the regular. I tell my staff, you don't work for ESPN. You work for you. I work for John Grant Incorporated. I'm my own business. ESPN is my client. My job is to provide a world-class service to my client as a vendor. If I take that mentality, then I don't have a job. I have a client. And that's a different orientation from any orientation. And I learned that from an instructor at North Carolina A&T. Never see yourself, John, in a job. You're always in business. You have your own P&L. Make sure you understand that what you have is a client, and to always seek to provide world-class service to your client. And when you don't, they have a right to get a new vendor. That is never personal. It's always business. And so that's been my mentality from the first time I was employed. And in my life, as a result of that, I've only looked for one job, and that was my first one. Every client that I had after that sought me by virtue of the fact how I engaged with them, both day to day in what I needed to do, but also externally, representing my brand and espousing them as a client of mine. So with that being said, across these 100+ universities, there are thousands and thousands of John Grants waiting to be tapped. And a smart company and smart recruiters are intentional about going out and tapping them.
That's right. Well, you're a heck of a salesperson, John Grant. So I know our sales organization is going to be like, sign me up. So as we were talking about HBCUs, I was on in an entirely different meeting. And we started talking about the Divine Nine. And I cannot describe what happened on this call. So I was in a sorority, but it was nothing like what I heard. In fact, there were sororities from the Divine Nine that were on my campus at school. I just had never heard of them referred to as the Divine Nine. So Sharon, you're is Alpha Kappa Alpha?
Correct.
Okay. And so can you explain what is the Divine Nine and what has your experience been?
Sure, absolutely. There are 9 Black Greek letter organizations. They are collectively made up and they make up the National Panhellenic Council. They are affectionately called the Divine Nine. Now, these organizations, through the years, really for most Black families and households, there's some tie to one of these organizations, be it fraternities or sororities. They are resource organizations, support organizations, assisting in the community, and really build long-lasting bonds and relationships to African American students while they're in the process of their collegiate studies. But the great thing about these organizations as well is even after and postgraduate studies, they do many things and impact our communities so specifically and strategically through their graduate chapters as well. And Tiffany, as you said, I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the oldest women's sorority and part of the Divine Nine, founded at Howard's campus on January 15th. So I say ski week to my sorors that may be watching, and shout out to my Divine Nine sister, Naira, and to all of the Greeks that may be watching as well. I think it's just been one of the best decisions I've made in my life. I too had a family member and had history with this organization, but I cannot say enough about all of these organizations, because whether they work individually or collectively, they are all supporting not just the African American community, while they do so much, whether it's through their programs for education, through college scholarship, through health and wellness, economic empowerment, but they also really support the community and greater good. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention that Madam Vice President is a member of my sorority and an Alpha Kappa Alpha member as well.
Way to get that in there, Sharon.
Hey.
Naira, so you're a Delta?
No, I am a Sigma Gamma Rho.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
Sigma Gamma Rho
I didn't mean to offend.
Incorporated.
Blue and gold.
Blue and gold, blue and gold. I say yep to my sorors, and I would be remiss if I didn't say hey to Sharon and the AKA. So shout out to you.
So talk to me more about, so this was, Sharon, you really introduced me to it for the first time when we first became engaged with the Celebration Bowl.
Yes.
And I'm like, what is the Divine Nine and what is this commitment to the community? I mean, I really want to make sure the folks that are watching understand, because there are probably many people that are members of Greek organizations,
Sure.
but maybe don't view it as the lifeline or the lifelong commitment to community that I've seen, and just the passion around the organizations and the work that is done. I don't know if I've seen anything to equal it. And it is just a passion around it. You want to be part of it.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little bit more about that community work? Because we honored several of the leaders this year in our Hometown Heroes project with ESPN. And we're going to continue to do so. So can you just talk a little bit more, either Naira or Sharon, about that community work?
Yeah,
So
I'll start off. Oh, go ahead, Naira.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, each organization, they have their own organizations that they support. I can speak for Sigma Gamma Rho. We are partnered with St. Jude, March of Dimes. We partner with women's health organizations where we provide mammograms for women who can't afford them. We just do so much for the community. Me moving back here to California, I came into the organization back in '91, so it's been 20 years. As a matter of fact, February 7th was my 20-year anniversary. I moved here last year and reactivated with Lambda Gamma Sigma chapter in Pomona, California, and 100% immersed myself in giving back to the community, especially during this pandemic. There's just so much need out here in the community. Being able to provide cradles and baskets and food for the community has just been awesome. But at the same time, it's the sisterhood. I knew 2 people out here in California, my family members. Now I know hundreds, because just the bond that you have with your sorority sisters, it's like family. My oldest sister is a Sigma Gamma Rho, and my 2 nieces are also Sigma Gamma Rhos. And so it's just the legacy. Our motto is greater service, greater progress, and that is what we live by every day. It's each organization doing what they can, each chapter doing what they can to support the communities that they serve.
Well, we've seen it firsthand, and I think it's tremendous, and something that, from a cricket perspective, I'm so glad we were exposed to that, and hope that we can do more together. So that'll do it for part 2, episode 3 of the Green Couch Conversations. If you're interested in more discussions like this one, look out for details on our Diversity Summit coming up on March 30th. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Green Couch.